you are going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to discipline. A lot of times, a lot of misbehaviors actually stem from kids wanting to feel connected to you, and they may be doing it in a way that's just not, appropriate or helpful.
Ooh, I like it. I like it. I like it,
You
Chris.
like it?
I like
you
it.
like it?
Yeah. Wait, pull it up. That almost sounds
we
like.
got one.
This
Come
is
on.
something you can surf with.
Tell me who this is. Is my mic not working?
Or maybe the music is just loud.
I don't hear it very
Yeah,
well.
you're on.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah,
For some
yeah,
reason,
yeah.
I'm not hearing myself.
You're yellow. Almost
Yellow.
red.
That band is very much a Green Day meets Blink 182.
Okay, look at you and your band.
Hey now.
Your musical repertoire.
Yeah. And at my age, you would think I would recognize like Bon Jovi or somebody. But I recognize Green Day's been around a long time.
Yeah, yes, you're right.
And so is
You're right.
Blink 182.
That's
so
true.
They've been around a long time. Well, hey everybody, welcome to another episode of our parent. I am so
On Purpose Parents
Thank you.
Podcast.
Well, let me
Podcast.
explain what happened.
What's going on, Kurt?
Before COVID, we had a podcast called Parent Skills. And people can search it and they can still find a whole bunch of old Parent Skills podcasts. And so all of a sudden I started to call it Parent Skills Podcast.
The old memory came
The old
back.
memory just came flooding back. Our On Purpose Parents, a way better title. So welcome to another episode of On Purpose Parents. So glad you're here. As always, Kurt Johnston, Grace Yoon over here off camera, producer Chris in the house, doing such a great job as he always does. And we are really excited about the next 3 episodes.
We are.
Here's what I'd say. I'm excited because I love short series. At church, we do a lot of series, and I'm a fan of shorter series. Like I have a little bit of ADHD kind of tendencies. I've never been diagnosed, but I don't love an 8-week series through the Book of John. Or I love the Book of John. Can we just talk about it in 3 weeks? After 8 weeks, I start to go, man, this is a lot. So I love series, but I love short series. So we're doing a 3-week series on discipline. We're going to tackle the topic of discipline. The series is called Discipline Decoded. So we're kind of going to unlock some of the mysteries and some of the challenges, struggles around discipline. It's going to be a great 3 weeks, three episodes together. And I just want to make, maybe Grace, if you're okay, producer Chris, a few, and feel free to chime in, either one of you, a few disclaimers out of the gate. I think let's just acknowledge out of the gate that discipline is fraught with challenges, emotions, just some parents hearing that we're going to talk for 3 episodes on discipline. Some of them are going to lean in because others are going to be very nervous because what are we going to say? Right. Are we going to challenge some of their philosophies? We'll probably challenge a little bit of everybody's philosophies. Yeah. You'll probably challenge some of my philosophies and I'll probably challenge some of you because we're kind of different generations. I'm Gen X, the forgotten generation. You're millennial?
I'm actually,
because we're 16 years apart in age.
So I've heard my generation, my year be called Zennials, which is a mix between millennials and Gen X. We're like right at the cusp of like being
interesting.
Some groups will say we're Gen X at the very tail end, and some people will say we're at millennial right at the
end.
Oh yeah, the older end. Yeah.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever end.
Do you have you paid enough attention to either to kind of identify as one or the other, or are you truly not all that concerned about it?
Maybe a real mix.
Really?
I would say, but I still remember I'm still part of the generation where like I had to learn how to use the typewriter or the keyboard in high school.
Well,
how do you learn?
I'm not right in the middle, but I am an older Gen X. So I do probably have some boomer tendencies in how I think about things.
Including discipline.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. So we'll talk about all of that.
Yes.
We're going to try not to be super duper prescriptive. I think discipline is one of those topics where we just believe that it's important enough to think about and to maybe have a strategy. And if you're married listening, this is for sure one of those things that you got to really think through and talk about and pray about with your spouse.
Yeah.
Because for the sake of your kids, you and your spouse want to at least be in the same ballpark, on the same page when it comes to how and why and when. What does discipline look like? Why do we discipline? Because if you're not, it's unfair to the child. So we're just going to kind of decoding it might be we're overselling that. I don't know if we're going to decode it. We're certainly
going to try.
We're going to talk about it.
Yes.
So having said all that, Grace, what are we focusing in on week 1?
Yeah, so today we are going to talk about some foundational concepts of discipline. And again, like Kurt said, this isn't meant to be prescriptive. This isn't going to be completely comprehensive. We're not going to, reinvent the wheel, but we do want to talk about some big picture thoughts and concepts that might help trigger some interesting or helpful or thoughtful conversations within marriages and families.
Yeah, and this will for sure be one of those series where you might go, no, ooh,
yeah,
no, oh, right, and you might get 1 or 2 nuggets out of each episode that really resonates with you as a parent, and that's perfect. That's great.
Yes,
we're not hoping you resonate with every single thing we're saying on each aspect of discipline.
Right, exactly. So we want to focus on foundations. Concepts of foundations this week, and then next episode we're going to talk about some pitfalls that we've identified and that we see as some dangers that parents can fall into when it comes to discipline. And then our last episode of the series, we're going to talk about some actual practical tips and skill sets, or like things that parents might be able to implement, and round out the series that way. So we're super excited.
All right, well, let's jump in.
Yeah, okay. So one of the things I wanted to talk about in this foundational on the foundations of discipline in this first episode is asking several questions to help us get to what are we even talking about. So the first question is, what even is the goal of discipline? And I find it really helpful for us
straighten out those whippersnappers,
to make them
make
straight
sure they
and narrow.
know that children are better seen, not heard. Oh, I'm sorry. How about that's the boomer in me coming out?
Yeah.
I apologize, Grace.
You did that really well. I'm kidding. But I think it's really helpful to ask that question, because when we talk to parents and when Chris does his survey, this topic comes up so much. People are super interested in discipline, but also super intimidated by it.
Right.
Because it's associated with a lot of feelings and emotions that we don't necessarily spend time to articulate. So some thoughts that I had was, what is the goal of discipline? What isn't the goal of discipline? So one is, in my mind, and again, these are just examples, it's not to avoid embarrassment. I'm just going to say a bunch of things because I think these are things we might think about that we don't bring to our consciousness, that somehow motivates our discipline, but may not be the right motivation. Oh my goodness, my kids are so embarrassing. I don't want to be embarrassed. I'm going to discipline them. I don't think the goal of discipline is like, I need to feel good about myself as a parent. So I need to please other people. And I think the way my kids are acting is not pleasing to other people in society. So I'm going to discipline them. It's also, I don't think, not forcing your kids into some image of perfection. Whatever that image is that has been given to you in your mind, I don't think the goal of discipline is to create some perfect, robotic, or angelic child. And lastly, I don't think discipline is about you. And I think as parents, sometimes we make it a lot about us, like about you, about feeling good about myself. And I will feel good about myself if you respect me. If you're disrespecting me, oh, that's a ding to my worth in a way. And so I'm going to discipline you, to do that. So I think those could all be some motivations, subconscious motivations for discipline that it's not what discipline is about. And what I'll close that out to say, my first thought is, I think one of the goals of discipline really is to learn, for the kids to learn, for us to learn, and for there to be this system of teaching and studying The root word of discipline, I heard this recently, is disciple. And that word disciple comes from the Latin word discipulus. I'm not sure if that's the right pronunciation, but that Latin word means student. So within the word discipline, it's rooted in the word student. It means one who studies, one who's learning, one who's building up skill sets, who's learning how to function better in society. And so when you think of discipline like that, rethink of it instead of being the way I think we think about discipline as punishment,
Right.
but rather as growing and
Yeah.
learning, teaching.
Right.
It changes a lot of things.
Yeah, that's good. I just had one thought on what is discipline, and it really was, well, here's what's not. And my word was punishment. It's not punishment. Punishment has a lot of negative connotations. Punishment feels and is often carried out in there is a wrong and a price must be paid for the wrong. Right? There is a consequence, and I believe in consequences. There should be consequences. There are natural consequences sometimes, whether we dole them out or not. There's natural consequences. But punishment is typically wrapped up in a level of harshness that I don't believe discipline has to have. Punishment is oftentimes we're going to teach you this lesson harsh once so you never do it again, right? When I think of punishment, I think of, and it's not a super clean analogy, but I sort of think of like the analogies are in Western movies and in real life, people, they have to break the will of a wild horse, right? We have to break the horse so that it obeys us.
Right.
That's just standard practice when what people... cowboys, they call them, so I don't know. But what those cowboy folks do
To the
is
horses,
they break the will of the horse so that the horse knows who's in charge, and there's all kinds of actually really important reasons why that's the case. Punishment to me oftentimes feels like that's the goal, is we're gonna force compliance through punishment versus we're gonna help grow our child. We're gonna disciple and discipline our child. Discipline is actually a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The Bible says in, I believe it's Hebrews, the Bible says that the Lord disciplines those he loves. Right?
That's good.
So what that tells us is what we know about God. The Bible says God is love. So if God, who is love, disciplines the kids whom he loves, then what we can rest in knowingly is that discipline actually is an act of love. Like if there is no discipline, you don't love your kids.
Right.
Right. So oftentimes, not all the time perfectly right, but it gets dangerous when we kind of compare God the Father with our role as parents. Right. And you can't do it in every analogy. But this is one where you say, okay, if our Heavenly Father disciplines his kids out of love, then as earthly parents, we should lovingly discipline our children.
Right.
Help them grow. Disciple them into being maybe lifelong interdependent followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution, right?
Yeah.
And so not disciplining is not loving. Punishment, I don't believe, is loving, but healthy, biblically grounded discipline is a really loving thing to do.
Yeah. And in a way, it makes it almost sometimes fun, because for me, my personality, if there's growth, like when you see from point A to point B, there has been transformation, there has been change, no matter how small it is, there's some growth happening. I find that so exciting. Like, look, you were throwing a tantrum before, but we've taught you some skills. That you can use your words, you know, or say please, and there's growth, and that can be exciting.
That's good.
You know,
and before you keep jumping in, or not before you keep jumping in, before I jump, I'm going to jump in before you continue. Is what I meant to say. My brain's going. I got surfer brain this morning, man.
I know,
anyway.
and a really cool surfer hat.
Oh,
I will say,
you know,
I like it.
This is this was a Father's Day gift. And this is my license plate on my truck.
Oh my gosh, really?
Yeah, this is
That's
I have
really
the old
cool.
school
Very
California, and they let you one off. So that's my license plate. Anyway, where was I going? I was jumping in. Oh, thank you. If I loved what you talked about, the root word of discipline being disciple. Discipleship takes time.
Right.
Discipleship is a process. Discipleship is a conversation. Discipleship is a back and forth. Discipleship is a letting our kids make mistakes and then talking about what did you learn? How are we going to grow? Like that's discipleship. That's discipline. Punishment is quick and easy. I don't want to deal with it anymore. They need to know it was wrong. And whatever, we dole out the punishment and we move on.
Right.
And I think that's maybe another just kind of
That's
key
good.
differentiator. I'm really liking.
Right.
This is an example of when we probably should have talked ahead of time.
Oh, yeah.
So I wouldn't be like so impressed with, and my mind's just going with, the root word is disciple.
Right.
That changes the game.
It does. It
So-
changes the perspective.
Yeah.
And it's for the child.
Right.
I'm teaching the child. Again, like punishment, I love what you said. It's quick and it's also sometimes about you.
Right.
I'm angry. This is a way to vent my frustration.
Yep.
Or you embarrassed me. I feel insecure in
Yeah.
front of all my other parent friends. I mean, I've had these conversations with other parents
Right.
that they got really upset with their kids. Why? Because they were embarrassed.
Yeah.
And that's where punishment comes
Right.
in. Whereas discipleship, you're thinking, what skill is missing here?
Right.
What does my child need in this moment that they're having this meltdown and unable to handle it maybe in a better way?
Right.
How can I help?
Yep.
Teach them.
And that's being proactive. Where I think the punishment piece, like what Kurt was talking about, is reactive, right? So it's like you broke the law, and we're going to make an example of you, so the other kids, don't break the same law, or so you don't ever do it again.
Right.
And it's like you're back on your heels, and it's a negative thing. But when you put the positive spin on it, it's more of like what you said, Grace. Oh, you know what? Recently, you ran like a marathon or something, right? What did you run?
Did that last year. I did a half.
You
recently.
did a half marathon
You're
recently.
You're slacking.
slacking.
She's going backwards.
I'm downgrading.
She's going backwards.
One of the many reasons
I'm
Kurt and I
aging.
are just in awe of you every time we record. You're so amazing with that.
Oh, thank
you had to be disciplined to do that. It's a good thing. It's not easy, but
Right.
but it's good. It's meant for good. And you discipline yourself by practicing beforehand so that you could do well in like that. And I think it's like the same way what you guys are talking about with discipline, that it's something that we want the best for him. We want him to be interdependent, lifelong followers of Jesus who want to make a kingdom contribution. So how does that happen? What do we do?
And we're going to talk about that in future episodes. Dun,
Yeah.
dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Well, and punishment keeps them in line, and discipline grows them and helps them become who Christ created them to become.
Right. That's good. I like that. And we're not saying, just to be clear for our parent listeners, we're not saying that that we never enact things that look like it's a punishment, right? Like kids may feel like this
Right.
is a punishment,
Right.
or they will use that word, but it's all about like, how are we approaching it?
Yeah,
How are
it's
we
good.
coming at
It's a
it?
good reminder.
So my second thought in terms of foundations of discipline is the point that the foundation of discipline really needs to be connection. And I've been reading a lot about this recently, just in my own personal life, but having real strong connections with your kids is really, in my mind, the foundation of any successful discipline. I read somewhere that we should be prioritizing connection over correction. And that's not saying we don't correct. Again, we're not saying just be like rainbow bright parents or, la-di-da and just
Right.
kind of let your kids run free. Like you
Right.
said, that's actually not disciplining.
Right.
And that's not loving your kids. But if you focus on the act of correction first and you're missing out on connecting with your kids because life is busy, you're busy, they're busy, you're stressed about work or whatever,
Yep.
you are going to be at a disadvantage when it comes to discipline. A lot of times, a lot of misbehaviors actually stem from kids wanting to feel connected to you, and they may be doing it in a way that's just not appropriate or helpful, but they're still getting attention from you. So someone once gave this example of like a kid who is jumping on the couch, on the edge, on the ledge, which is something you told them not to do. But if they're jumping up and down and you're suddenly looking over and saying, hey, don't do that, come over here, and interacting with them maybe in like a disciplinary way, that's still a form of connection with that child. So there are things where kids, if they feel lacking in attention, they want that attention, and somehow they'll subconsciously find ways to be seen, to be heard, to be paid attention to, but maybe in like non-productive ways.
Right.
One of my favorite relationship researcher professors, I've talked about him before on this podcast, I know many parents may know him, Gottman. He calls this work on connection building up the child's emotional bank account. And so the more a child's emotional bank account is filled, the better leverage and discernment you have when it comes to effective discipline. And so I'll just say the way that it gets filled, he calls it a bid for connection. And a bid for connection really is just an attempt someone makes to get attention, affection, or acceptance. And this bid for connection could be like a teenager could look like they just walk past you in the kitchen and they kind of nudge you, just like, they just like bump into you and you're just like, hey, but it's just like a little like, hey, I'm here.
Yep.
And he says and I'll leave this point with this, there are 3 responses to this bid for connection. You could either be positive response where you turn towards that person. You could be negative where you turn away, like, go away. Stop. I'm too busy right now. Or you could have a no response. Like you literally just ignore them. Like they bump into you and you're like, oh, whatever, like, or you're, sometimes with younger kids, they'll asking you questions and you honestly, you don't even hear them.
Yeah.
You're just not listening. And, anyway, the ways that as parents, especially with young kids, you may not be able to always meet their bid for connection because you're busy, like you can't. But if we're mindful of that as parents, and if we start to recognize these bids for connection that kids are putting out there, we can start to respond in that positive way. So like if you're busy and your kid comes up to you and says, Mommy, you want to play with me? You may not be able to play at that time, but you could turn towards them and give them a response like, oh, playing with you, that's one of my favorite things. You're like the best play partner I could ever have. I can't do it right now, but why don't we like at 5:00, go for a scooter ride for 15 minutes. But even just being conscious of, hey, if someone's making a connection bid, just give them something back. It starts to fill up their emotional bank. And then that really, and we're going to talk about it more in future episodes, will propel really positive or create a positive foundation for effective discipline when you have to have some harder conversations.
Yeah, that's so good. Wow. Well, my closing thought on just kind of my closing thought on the intro conversation about discipline is I think discipline, in my experience as a parent, talking to over my course of my career, literally thousands of parents, is it seems as if discipline works best when it's thoughtful and intentional and not reactive. And producer Chris touched on it earlier. He said, hey, it's proactive, right? Thoughtful, intentional, and not reactive. It does not mean that you're not going to get it wrong. It probably means you're going to get it wrong less often than if you just knee jerk, well, we got to deal with it right now. I was embarrassed, or they got out of line, or, let's get it over with. You discipline out of anger, you discipline out of frustration, you punish. Oftentimes, you have to kind of course correct, which is okay. Please do. Right? The best thing we can do as parents is to course correct and admit when we got it wrong. And but if you're thoughtful and intentional and proactive instead of being reactive, I think you'll find as parents that you get discipline right more often than you get it wrong.
I like that. And that actually segues really well into my last thought, which is discipline works best within an established family system of values. And that is exactly what you're saying, Kurt. If you are coming up with family values or a family mission statement, I really encourage parents to do that. Like this is something Sam and I and the girls have been working on. We're still working through it, but I think we've landed on a vision, and now we're like trying to map out what our values are. That's just like fun for us. We've like written it out on the whiteboard and just like pondering it. But when you have like these established set of values, then discipline sensically falls into place with that.
Yes.
And it's like you said, it feels more thoughtful, and kids get it too.
Right.
They are not just like, oh, my parents are just telling me no because
They don't want me to have fun.
they're jerks.
Right.
No, it's for example, like one of the rules that we have with our kids is one of our values is building up others and showing kindness. And we say we have truly a zero tolerance for contempt in relationships. And we'll talk about that with our kids.
Yep.
So it's like, yeah, I mean, sometimes we lose our temper, we get mad, or we're cranky, and we talk about it, but if there is a sign of contempt, we kind of nip that in the bud immediately. Like,
Yep.
Nope, we don't roll our eyes at each other. I mean, that's a small example, but we don't speak down to we don't cut someone down. We don't say things that make them feel lesser to make you feel better.
Right.
That we nip it in the bud because we feel that that's so toxic to a relationship. And there may be consequences related to behavior there.
Right.
But we tie it into
The family value.
and they get it.
Yeah.
It makes sense. And that I think lends to what you were saying about it being thoughtful,
Right.
it being not just reactive
Yep.
because you're angry, but it's part of a system,
Yes.
a structure.
Well, awesome. We're going to end it right there. And we've got 2 more episodes, so we'll unpack discipline some more. Thanks for joining us. If you would like to, if you're watching on YouTube, you can click any of these buttons. Here's all our various episodes. Please click up there, click down here. And if you would, and you like what we're doing, if you would subscribe, you can push this button right around here somewhere, right there. Push
Do
that
it.
to subscribe. That helps us and helps the podcast spread. We're so thankful for you. We're praying for your parents. You've got this. Keep doing what you're doing. Or don't if you're doing it really. If you're doing it really.
doing it great.
If you're doing it poorly, don't keep doing what you're doing. But for the most part, hang in there. We'll see you guys next time around.
Bye, everyone.
Is that the band of me without